obviously every opportunity we get, we take it to keep the story alive, to maintain people's interest and awareness in the story, to keep people posting and sharing and resharing and talking, because you know we don't want, like has happened so many times in the past, for this thing to fall away from people's attention, for something crazy to happen in the world, and everybody's focus shifts to the next thing.
It was the early morning hours of March 24th, 1998. The Rhapsody of the Seas was sailing through the Caribbean Sea, preparing to dock in Curacao. The deep, dark water stretched as far as the eye could see, nearly swallowing the horizon. On the balcony of cabin 8564 sat 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley. She had spent that night with her brother, Brad, dancing and having fun at the ship's pool and disco parties. The siblings returned to their family's cabin just before 4 a.m. Together, they finished their drinks, smoked cigarettes, and talked about their plans for the rest of the trip. Their final words to one another, "I love you." Later that morning, the Bradley family would find Amy's sandals on the balcony. Missing were Amy's cigarettes, her lighter, her ID, and her keycard, and Amy Bradley herself. Sometime between midnight and morning, somewhere between a safe shore and the open sea, Amy Bradley disappeared. I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast. There was nothing out of the ordinary about Amy Bradley or her whereabouts leading up to her disappearance, making the mystery all the more puzzling to her family. The Bradleys quickly alerted the ship's crew that Amy was missing. However, an announcement was not made until later that morning. By that time, the cruise ship had docked at Curacao, and many passengers had already disembarked. At one point that morning, a man by the name of Alistair Douglas, nicknamed Yellow, approached Brad Bradley to offer his sympathies about the situation. But the conversation happened before any announcement was made to the ship, making his knowledge of the situation suspicious to the Bradley family. Yellow was later interviewed by the FBI about Amy's disappearance. He was given a polygraph test, which was inconclusive, but the FBI would ultimately release him, as there was no evidence to bring charges in the case. As authorities continued their investigation, they found no evidence that would suggest that Amy fell overboard, was pushed, or that she committed suicide. Many theories have arisen in the years since Amy's disappearance, ranging from kidnapping, sex trafficking, and even suggesting that Amy left on her own volition. Nonetheless, the Bradley family has not given up in their pursuit of answers. Brad Bradley was featured in the Netflix docuseries Amy Bradley is Missing. He joins me now to discuss where his sister's case stands today and how the tragedy of Amy being missing has impacted his family. Before we talk about the circumstances surrounding Amy's disappearance, I would love to just talk about her.
Yeah.
What was she like, and what was it like growing up with her as a sister, and share with listeners who Amy
Yeah,
encompasses.
it was awesome. Our childhood was amazing. We grew up in this. We moved into the neighborhood we grew up in 1979, and we had a ton of friends. A really cool neighborhood. We had a creek with the rapids and the rope swing, and did a lot of fishing and hanging out, and riding bikes on the trails. A lot of our childhood was spent in the driveway playing basketball against each other, which I don't know if you've heard other interviews I've done, but she was really, really good at basketball and would kick my butt regularly until I got a lot older and taller and a little stronger. I could handle her a little bit, but she was a lot of fun. Every person that's ever met her would describe her as the light in the room and the life of the party. She was really funny, really nice conversation. She never met a stranger, really easy to talk to, and liked to have a good time. So, our family was extremely close, always, and, never really had any issues at all. Amy was, was amazing. She was a perfect sister, one of my best friends, especially as we got a little bit older. And obviously she's been missed very bad for a long time.
Is there a memory in particular that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there's a a bunch of them. A lot of memories, like I said, down at the creek, fishing and playing on the rope swing. Um, Tons of memories. My dad used to have a bass boat. He would take us and our friends out tubing and skiing and that kind of thing. Um, you know, Too many memories to count of us being together, hanging out with her friends at, whether it was high school parties or whether it was me visiting her in college. She went to Longwood University, and it was probably about an hour away from our house. So I'd go up there and visit. We go shoot pool. Um, I guess one story that kind of sticks out is when I was still in well, I don't know whether I was still in high school or not. It might have been 19, 18 or 19, and I was working at this little uh, kind of gas station, Bullets, Dunkin' Donuts type of thing with a buddy of mine over the summer. And the kids that worked in that place with us were from a different high school. So I mentioned to some of the guys at work that I was going to have some friends over that night. And turns out they ended up, I guess, telling the entire high school that I was having a party. So very quickly got out of control, and there were hundreds of people at my house. My parents were out of town. It wasn't something that I intended to happen, and Amy came home and quickly dispersed the crowd. She went into big sister mode, and wasn't mad at me because she understood it wasn't something that I had planned to do. But she got people out of there in a hurry. So she flexed on her big sis muscles and and took care of the situation. But that was one of the more memorable occasions we had together.
Yeah, there's no regulator like the big sis regulator. I have two of them, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And all my friends were always terrified of them too. Can you describe for listeners your whole family? How many siblings and the age differences and sort of the general dynamic and climate. You mentioned, of course, you guys were super close, but talk to us about the family.
Yeah, so mom and dad had us relatively young. I'm 25 years younger than dad. So he had me when I was 25, had Amy probably at 22 or 23. Um, uh, so Amy was a little more than 2 years older than I was. She and I were the only siblings. So I don't have any other brothers and sisters. And, like I said, our friends, growing up, we had the type of family that, other people wished they had. Obviously not in all cases, but a lot of divorce and things like that. And our family was extremely close, and one of the places that friends would come to hang out, and so that I don't know. I guess we kind of grew up with my parents. I mean, they were again pretty young when they had us, and the weird thing to me is that when this happened and Amy disappeared, my parents were much younger than I am now. So
Mm.
it's kind of I've lived a lot more of my life without Amy than I did with, and but our family was always, still is, the mom and dad and I um, are a tight unit. I built a house probably about 200 yards from them. So I could always be near. I can be over there in 60 seconds just walking. So we from the time we were little kids until even right now, we have just one of the closest relationships that I know of.
I want to move on to the cruise. Um, what was the mood like for your family leading up to the trip? Describe the plans for it and what exactly the circumstances were as you booked and then went on this cruise.
Yeah, so my parents worked for an insurance agency, which they still do. Not actually, he's my dad's licensed through a number of different companies, but anyway,
Okay.
my parents qualified for the cruise as kind of a bonus for the year's production that year. Um, so Amy and I weren't initially invited on the cruise. My parents got two tickets to go. And soon after they learned that they had won that prize, they contacted the higher ups in the company and got permission to bring Amy and I. So they had already had their plane tickets and their plans and everything. So we had to get separate, plane tickets to fly down, after mom and dad had. But the mood leading up to it was excited. I had been on one cruise prior to that one with a buddy of mine in high school. We went on a Miller Lite AVP, beach volleyball cruise because we were both on the high school volleyball team. So I had a lot of fun during that trip, and obviously was looking very much forward to the next one. My parents had been on one cruise with a pair of aunt and uncles a couple years prior, and Amy had not been, but she was asking a lot of questions, and we were all really looking forward to it. I have a fear of flying, still do, unfortunately. So my travel history is pretty slim, but um, I wasn't going to miss out on the trip just because I had to get down there. And Amy was a little hesitant at first because she didn't really like the ocean. Um, she and I were both proficient swimmers. We grew up on the swim team our whole lives. She was a lifeguard and a swim coach, so there was no problem in the water. It was just what was in the water that that kind of made her uneasy. But again, like me, similar to my fear of flying, we quickly kind of got over our fears and decided it was on. So um, yeah, we were all very much looking forward to it. It was probably going to be one of the last family vacations before life took over, and I was in college. Amy had just graduated, so she was starting a new job when she was to get home from the cruise. And but yeah, we were pumped.
And how were the first 2 days spent together on the cruise as a family?
The first 2 days, so we flew down from Richmond to San Juan, and the boat left there on it was a Saturday, I suppose, the 21st of March, 1998. The first 2 days of the cruise were just at sea sailing. So we spent some time at the pool. We spent some time in the casino. Um, just all the things there were to do on the boat. Mom and Amy went to an art auction, hung out with some of my parents' business associates. Um, you know, uh, Dinners and lunches and breakfasts and all the stuff you do while you're waiting to get to the first island. So the first 2 days were just spent at sea sailing, and we did pretty much all the things that we knew that were available to do in those 2 days.
You've described the trip thus far, but when did things take a turn? Talk to me about that final day.
So we get to Aruba on the morning of the 23rd. When we woke up, we were there.
Yeah.
And so we get off on that island, and we didn't really have, plans for the day. We kind of got off and figured it out as we went. Mom and dad decided to rent a kind of a small SUV to just take off and go exploring. So we hopped in this convertible. It was kind of like an Isuzu Sidekick type thing, small SUV, and we just kind of took off, and we ended up getting lost in the middle of the desert. The backside of Aruba, when you get off the ship, there's a lot of, pretty beaches and resorts and, places to shop and that kind of thing. But when you kind of get off the beaten track, it's a little bit of a wasteland, at least the area that we were in that day. And we didn't know where we were. We didn't know how to get back. And we were, getting roasted by the sun for several hours until we finally figured out, how to get back to the area we needed to be back to. Before we got back on the boat, we stopped by a little beach and we all hopped in the water. Like I told you before, Amy wasn't a big fan of what was in the water. So as soon as she got up, the water got up to her knees. She quickly jumped on Dad's back and hung there until we were ready to get out of the water. So I think we ate at a Taco Bell. We got back on the boat, took showers, took some naps because we had been sun beaten for most of the day. And after that, we got up and changed into. Actually, I think Amy and I went to the casino for a short time, and then we got changed into our formals for the formal dinner that they were having that night. And so we go to the dining room. We sit down with the same group of my parents' business associates and some friends. Had a nice dinner, and during the dinner, it became apparent that the waiter, his name was Eduardo, he was more attentive to Amy than he was to anyone else, and we all kind of jokingly would say, "Hey, if you need a refill, just tell Eduardo that Amy wants it, and it'll be here a lot faster." So, and I didn't find that to be too unusual. You have this dinner with the same people, with the same wait staff, and they, develop rapport and that kind of thing throughout the trip. And I didn't think it was all that unusual that, he was a bit flirtatious with her. Um, After the dinner, Amy and I went out. Mom and Dad weren't part of the photos that we took that you see on the documentary. So she and I went out to take our formal pictures. And, shortly after that, we went back down to the room to change into what we were going to wear up to the pool party that night. And I don't know the timing of when this happened, but at some point, my mom and Amy went up to the photo booth to pick up her pictures or our pictures. And they walk up, and the photographer or whoever the person was there that was selling the photos, they came up and said, "Hey, we'd like to get the pictures that we took tonight." And my mom recalls that he was like, "Oh yeah, they're right over here. I remember I just put them over there not too long ago." So he turns around, and where Amy's pictures were supposed to be, it was a blank spot. And he, looked puzzled and turned back around to Amy and my mom and said, "Is there? That's weird. Is there any way, anyone from your group would have, bought the pictures for you?" And they said no. So my mom still has, they were never able to find her photos or our photos, and mom had to submit a reprint ticket, which she still has, to finally get the pictures that we took that night. So again, that time it was kind of like a weird little thing, but didn't really think a whole lot of it then. Um, so, like I said, we go down, we get changed out of our formal attire and into our, shorts and t-shirts and whatever we were wearing. We go back up to the pool deck where they were going to have this event called, I believe it was called Dancing Under the Stars. And there was, the ship's calypso band called Blue Orchid that was playing there. The bass player, his nickname was Yellow, also known as Alistair Douglas. Currently goes by Christopher Douglas. But so they're playing. There was a large group of people with an entourage of people that were with them that apparently got onto the ship from Aruba. And there's 50, 60 people standing off to the side where all the performers are, juggling and dancing, and there's fire and there's all kinds of stuff going on. So during the pool party, Amy and I are going up to the band and we're requesting, songs, some of which they knew and some they didn't. During the pool party, Amy ended up kind of off to the side talking to two black women for upwards of an hour. They were wearing, navy knee-length skirts and light blue Oxford button-up shirts. So they matched each other, but they didn't match any of the other employees of that boat. I suspect that they boarded the ship from Aruba with that large group of people that I talked about. I've heard interviews from former passengers, not passengers. I've heard interviews from former crew members that suggest that those two ladies were most likely either Aruba customs or Aruba police officers based on their attire. So I don't think they were passengers, and I don't think they were of the employ of the ship. So, after a certain amount of time passed, my mom looks over and, she found it odd that Amy was, during a really fun party with music and drinks and friends and business associates, that she'd be kind of stuck over just having this really long conversation with two strangers. So when my mom and dad were getting ready to go to bed, they walked over to Amy to let her know. And whereas the two women had previously been fairly animated and friendly, they kind of stepped back and didn't speak to my parents, didn't introduce themselves, and kind of put up this kind of ice wall. And my mom explained to Amy that they were going to go ahead and head to bed, and said, love you, and she said the same. And I remember seeing her standing there talking to them, but I never walked over there to see what they were talking about.
When your parents went to bed, were you still at the party awake and you were just talking to other people? Did you see your parents go over and say goodnight? They said goodnight to you too and left, and then you were still with Amy there at the party?
Yeah, but I can't recall exactly. Again, I was talking to some of their friends, mom and dad's friends, and I didn't walk over and and join the conversation with Amy.
Right.
She and I, after I guess their conversation ended, we ended up back, on the pool deck, and the band's starting to pack up, and we probably got another drink before we headed up to the dance club. Um, so. And I don't have the exact timing of when that was. It was, I think the pool party ended shortly after midnight or right around then. I think the festivities on that deck continued just till about 1 a.m., which is just when the ship set sail from Aruba. So you could tell, at that time, similar to when the boat first left San Juan, you kind of get that uneasy, a little bit of seasick feeling because of the motion of the boat. And that takes, a fair amount of time to get your sea legs and get used to. So I remember that the boat was, pulled off while we were still outside. And I know that was right at 1 a.m.
And at this point, it's late. You're without your parents. What do you and Amy do next?
So shortly after that, I go up to the Viking Lounge first, and I got there before Amy because I remember, um, being in the club and seeing her and Yellow come off the elevator together. So music's playing, everybody's dancing and drinking, and at some point, Amy and Yellow are recorded dancing by a video editor, or the videographer that was employed by a separate company on that boat to record that company's footage. And that's the footage you see of Amy and Yellow dancing in the documentary. During that time, I think I was out on the dance floor for a little bit of that, but I was also in the later part of the evening, I was over to the side talking to a couple of girls that I had met. So I wasn't hanging out with Amy the whole time in the club. An hour passed, hour and a half passed, and as the bar was closing or the club was closing, I think they called last call at 2:30. The club closes around 3, and right as it was closing, I turn around, to kind of locate where Amy was, and she was sitting on the upper level, right over top of the bar, at a table with 3 or 4 or 5 people, one of which was Alistair Douglas. And so I'm hanging out with these girls. I look up and I say, "Hey, I'm going outside," and she kind of waved me on. And so I walked outside, I don't know, 30, 40 feet to a group of chairs, lounge chairs that were out on one of the upper decks. And I sat there and talked to these girls for, a half an hour or so before I headed back to the room myself. So I kick myself, and I have for years and years, why I would have gone back to the room without going back inside to get Amy to come with me. She was my older sister. She was never in need of any protection as far as my history with her during our lives. And unfortunately, I wasn't I didn't have a protective mindset at the time. So, she's an adult, I'm an adult, we're doing our own thing. And I go back to the room, and the key card data shows that I enter the cabin at 3:35 a.m. And then, literally 5 minutes later at 3:40, Amy comes through the room. When she walks into the room, my dad asked her to stop and turn the light that's in the bathroom off. So she woke him up when she came in. I kind of snuck through because no one said anything to me. And she went back and turned the light off, and then came out onto the balcony to finish our drinks and have a cigarette and chat a bit before we went to bed.
What were those final moments you spent with Amy like? What did you guys talk about?
So, we're just out on the balcony, having a drink and talking about essentially, what we were going to be doing the next day. Amy always kind of leaned on me because she knew I had been on a cruise before, but I just explained to her that I hadn't been to Curacao before, so I didn't know really what what there was to do there. We talked, maybe we'd jet ski, maybe we'd snorkel, maybe we'd go on a hike, maybe we'd spend some more time on the beach. We certainly weren't going to rent a vehicle and go exploring again. Uh, we sat out there and talked, and I don't know the the duration of the time we spent out there. Um, I think it was probably 15, 20, 25 minutes. At one point during our conversation, she mentioned that Yellow had tried to touch her chest, and I think this is when they were dancing. And she didn't make a big deal of it. She basically kind of laughed it off and said, I don't think so, buddy. Not happening. So I didn't think a whole lot of it because she didn't seem to either. And again, we just talked about what we were going to do the next day. So it was roughly 4 a.m. at that point, and I knew we had to be up in a few hours. So I said, "Look, it's time for bed. I gotta, we're gonna get 2 or 3 hours sleep for this whole next day." And so I said, "I'm going inside." And she said, "Well, I think I'm gonna sleep here on the lounge chair. The wind feels nice. I don't feel very good." And at the time, I assumed that she was referring to, the motion of the boat and kind of feeling a little bit seasick. So I said, "Okay, well, I love you," which is the last thing I ever said to her. She said, "I love you too." And I went back into the room, slid the sliding glass door closed, and went to bed just inside the sliding glass door on the pull-out couch, literally, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet from her.
So then what happened when you woke up the next morning?
Yeah, so I was woken up by my parents standing at the foot of the pull-out couch that I was sleeping on. And they had a look on their face that I hadn't seen before. Um, so at that point, they explained to me that they couldn't find Amy, and I kind of sprang up in bed, like, what do you mean? And they said, we're going to go out and look for her, and want you to stay here in case she comes back while we're gone, so we don't miss each other. To back up, my dad had woken up at 5:30 a.m., looked at his watch, saw me on the pull-out couch, and Amy wasn't there, so he kind of looked around and looked a bit further. The curtain to the balcony was open, but not all the way, so he could see her from kind of just above her knees down to her feet, and see that she was, sleeping in the chair, or at least sitting in the chair. He didn't get up, and he's always said, she looked like she was comfortable. We were going to be up, in the next 30, 45 minutes anyway. So he fell back asleep. He woke up around 6 o'clock, and whereas previously, when I told you I closed the door when I came in, the door was open and probably about 12 or 14 inches. The shirt that she had on when she fell asleep was on the chair inside the room, and she was gone. Um, so he goes out minutes after that. Didn't wake mom or I at that time, and he went out and searched for her. I think initially fully expecting to find her, going to get coffee or standing up on one of the upper decks watching the ship come into port and that kind of thing. After spending close to an hour searching everywhere he knew to look, and obviously not finding her, he comes back to the room. On the way back to the room, he runs into the chief of security, guy named Lou Costello, who's standing just so happens about 30 feet from our cabin door on that entire ship. So he walks over to security and he says, "My name is Ron Bradley. I woke up this morning. My daughter was not in the room, and I've been looking for her for about an hour, and I can't find her." So he comes back into the room, touches my mom on her foot, and she turns around to a look that, obviously was something she had never seen. So I think that, and he said, "Honey, I can't find Amy." And so she immediately panicked because of my dad's demeanor. And he explained to her that he'd been out looking for, an hour and couldn't find her. Um, so they, quickly woke me up and explained to me that they were going back out to search. They were out for another 20, 30 minutes or so before they came back finally and asked me to come out and help. So I go out. We're all looking around everywhere, every public area that we knew of, that we had been to. I went up and I'm walking around the walking track and I'm walking through the dining areas and I'm walking up into the Viking Lounge. And at that time, this was probably right around 7:15, 7:30. And again, I'm not looking at my watch, so I don't have exact time frames. Um, I look over the rail, and on the water side, not on the side of the ship that people are getting off or that are going to disembark on the land, but on the side facing the water, I look over and there's two doors at the water level that are open. And there's boats, kind of small to medium sized boats coming and going up to and from those doors. And they're dropping things off. They're taking things off the ship. And I suspected it was, they're taking trash off or they're delivering supplies for the day or what have you. But I have since long suspected that potentially Amy could have been removed from the ship via those water level doors that morning. Um, so I sit back down at a table by the pool by myself, and I'm exasperated at this point. I realize that, this isn't good. Amy would, be hooking up with some person in their cabin. We together until 4 o'clock in the morning. No reason for her to really be gone, 2 hours later. Um, so the bass player walks up to me at this point, and it's sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock now. And the first thing he says to me is, "Hey, man, I'm sorry to hear about your sister." And there had been no announcements made. There were no pages over the loudspeaker. My parents had only just reported it to the purser's desk at about 7:30. So at the time, I didn't think anything of it really. I'm kind of in my own head, and I'm reeling as to kind of what is happening. And so I thanked him for his comment, and he said, "I left her at 3:30. When did you last see her? What happened?" And so I started to go through, when I left the club and when I got back to the room. And he said, "Hold on a second. I want my brother to hear this." So he walks over about 50 feet to my right. There's a table with some guys sitting at it, and he tells one of them to come back over. And so when they get back, he's like, "Okay, go ahead." And so I proceeded to give him my exact timeline, when I got back to the room, when Amy got back to the room, and all these things. And I don't remember how that conversation ended, but retrospect, it was odd first to me that he knew that there was something to be sorry about that early in the morning. It's odd to me that he interrupted my time frame to go get one other person for some reason, and I think it was to get their story straight from mine.
What happened next? Was the ship's crew cooperative?
We got off the boat later that day after the captain assured us that the boat had been completely searched, which we later found was untrue. And he suggested that if Amy were to be found in the water on Curacao, there was an active water search ongoing at the time in the canal and back where the boat was docked and things. And he said, if she's found here, you're going to want to be here. And we really couldn't disagree with him because we fully trusted that they actually searched the ship like they said they did, and she wasn't on there. And he said, "Your daughter is not on this ship." So we get off. The president of my dad's company and his wife get off with us to help us because we're a wreck, and we can't stop crying, we can't function. So they get us a hotel room along the canal. That night, that evening, I think it was probably 5 o'clock in the evening or so when we got off. We later watched the boat leave on time, on schedule, right past our bedroom window. We're calling family and we're contacting people to, come and or to try to get the FBI involved to get them on the ship. later that night, two officers from the Scientology ship called the Free Winds knock on our door at midnight. My mom had requested a priest, and I think through the efforts of the U.S. Embassy or U.S. Consulate, they weren't able to find a priest to come pray with us. So, two Scientology guys show up from that ship, which is headquartered in Curacao, and they do all kinds of weird things and ask a lot of specific questions about Amy's favorite cigarettes and what kind of beer does Amy drink and what are her favorite snacks and really, again, very specific information that they're learning. They go through this verbal exercise where they have each one of us recite, now that we've lost Amy, we haven't lost each other. Now that we've lost Amy, we haven't lost our family and our friends. And we went through this for a period of time. They had us lay down on the bed face down and kind of put hands on our back, which I've since learned they refer to as a nerve assist, whatever that means. And at that point, my dad spoke up and asked them to leave because it was strange. And they invited us on the ship. We declined. The next day, we get up, and the authorities that were conducting the search told us that nothing was found, and they believed that if for any reason she was in the water, that they would have found something. So we say, okay, we get on a commercial flight. We fly to St. Martin. We beat the boat there. And so we spend the night in a hotel. The next morning we get on the ship again, and we're greeted by ship's risk management team, who was standing front and center at that point. The Norwegian consulate was on board. The ship did fly a Norwegian flag at the time. So we're under, Norway's laws.
Did Yellow come back up in the investigation at all?
Early the next morning, and I think it was around 3:45 in the morning, my mom and I are walking around trying to, potentially retrace Amy's steps. And these two gals, Crystal and Lori, run up to my mom and I, and they're breathless, they're panicky, they're white as a ghost, and they, apparently been looking for us for a couple of days because they didn't understand that we had gotten off the boat. And they said, we saw Amy go up the elevator with Yellow at sometime between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And then he, about 10 or 15 minutes later, came walking back by us by himself. So those two girls we hung out with, they met Amy and I. We spent some time with them in the casino and at the pool party and in the club. Yellow had flirted with them. They knew who he was. And they have been adamant for 27 years that they know who they saw and when they saw them. The ship later, I guess, questioned Yellow. The FBI ended up interviewing him. Unfortunately, the FBI in the documentary, you hear Agent Sheridan say that unfortunately they were never able to corroborate the girl's time frame. Well, that's because to this day they never interviewed Crystal's mother, who we have a signed affidavit from saying that she opened the door from the inside, which doesn't register in the key card system, and let them in the room just after 6 a.m. That would have easily corroborated the girl's time frame and potentially given the FBI enough information to detain Alistair Douglas, but that was never done. So interviews went on. In the documentary, you hear people talk about this table on the balcony pushed up against the rail. That table was not there when we woke up that morning.
Were you and your family interviewed?
The FBI separated my parents and I initially. As I understand, we were suspects early in the investigation because we were some of the last people with her, or known to be with her. They asked us each to draw where the balcony furniture was that morning when we woke up. It was a regular sitting chair, a small table, and then the lounge chair. We each individually drew the table beside Amy's chair against the sliding glass door. Our pictures were identical. As you heard the other FBI, Agent McCullum, talk about, that room was cleaned by the ship's staff before the FBI could investigate the room. And it's my opinion that I believe that table was pushed against the rail to support a narrative that that company would love for everybody to believe. Whether she climbed on the table to jump over, which didn't happen.
And Brad, how are you confident, and why are you confident that Amy did not jump or fall?
Amy had just graduated college. She had a really good job, making good money. She had just gotten a new apartment. She had just gotten a brand new English Bulldog puppy that she had wanted her whole life. She was going to start a new job with my uncle's computer company when she got back. She was writing postcards to friends, talking about what they were going to do when she got home, letting them know when she was going to be back. Absolutely no way she jumped off the boat. She's 5'6" with a 44-inch rail. So her center of gravity is far too low for her to accidentally fall over the rail. And I think one other important point is, when people hear about someone missing from a cruise ship, the automatic assumption is that you're in the middle of the ocean and you're at sea when the disappearance occurs. That ship left Aruba at 1 a.m. At the lowest average traveling speed of a cruise ship. That boat was in front of the mouth of that canal between 4:30 and 5 a.m. that morning. The docking process takes, I've seen estimates anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. And that boat was apparently docked right around 6 a.m. So the only way she would have ended up in the water is if someone threw her off the boat. And if she had gone over, she would have been in that little skinny canal. We're not out a mile from the island. We're not 10 miles from the island. We were at the island, and the time frame that Crystal and Lori saw her, sometime between 5:30 and 6, the boat's, halfway or three-quarters through the entire canal, and the boat's creeping along. There's no waves. There's no, the boat's steady as a rock. It's not rocking back and forth and, in any kind of way to make someone lose their balance.
Are there any other witnesses who saw Amy or claimed to see Amy with yellow before her disappearance?
There's a third eyewitness that testified in the grand jury in Richmond in 2000 that says that she was in the Viking Lounge early that morning preparing for her next day's excursion, and she saw Amy in yellow get off the elevator from inside. She says that they go up to that upper area where I saw Amy in yellow and those people sitting when I left the club the night before. Yellow walks back down to the bar, fixes a dark drink, comes up and hands it to Amy, and then they get up and walk back into an area where she couldn't see them any longer. In the back of that club, up on the second level, there's a crew elevator that goes straight down to the bottom of the ship. It's separate from the two glass elevators that, the passengers travel in. And so that morning, Crystal and Lori see them go up the elevator to the Viking Lounge, which is all glass windows. You can see everything in there. Elizabeth sees her from inside the Viking Lounge. Yellow comes back out 10, 15 minutes later, walks by Crystal and Lori. And I believe he stopped and talked to Crystal. So they know for sure he was out there at that time. I believe he handed her off to somebody in the back of that club, and she was taken down into the bottom of the boat. And again, I shared with you before that I believe she was removed that morning through those water level doors off the backside of that ship via boat.
Brad, can you share, there have been many theories and alleged sightings of Amy in the years since. I can imagine what it's like to sift through what is genuine and what isn't, but can you sort of describe that in terms of any promising leads that you are pursuing now?
The fact that we know that Yellow was with her until 3:30 because he told me to my face that night. I mean, the next morning, rather, that I left her at 3:30. In a recent interview, he says that, and this was 9, 10 months ago that he gave, which is the only interview I've ever seen him give. He says he was in his room at 1 a.m. because that was the ship's policy. Not only do we have him on video dancing somewhere between 1:30 and 2:30 a.m., he told me he was with her until 3:30. I saw them personally at 3 a.m. together. So why is he lying? His roommate says that they were in their room at 1 a.m. We know that's not true. His roommate, Oscar Alexander, in a recent statement on social media, says that security knocked on their door at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to search their room for Amy. And obviously, the problem with that, Amy wasn't reported missing until after 7. Yellow claims the hotel manager called his room at 7 a.m. to let him know Amy was missing. The chief security officer says that he wasn't made aware of a missing passenger until he was paged by the purser's desk at 7:33 a.m. But remember, my dad told him at 7 a.m. that Amy was missing. That's not included. His interaction with my dad is not included in the security report of that ship. The hotel manager in the security report was notified at 9 a.m. So how's he going to call Yellow at 9? So tons of inconsistencies and provably false claims by those two roommates, as well as 3 eyewitnesses that saw Amy with him that morning between 5:30 and 6 a.m. So obviously he needs to be reinvestigated. We're currently working on that angle. Obviously, we're trying to find Amy. That's our number one goal. If she's not alive and she's not out there, we're not going to stop trying to hold the people accountable who are responsible for what happened to her. So we're working with, we met with Senator Grassley's team in D.C. a month ago with the Senate Judiciary Committee. We met with Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears here in Richmond. We've met with Jason Miaris's office, who's the Attorney General here in Richmond. We're trying to work our way into the DOJ, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Donald Trump, all these people that were trying to make something happen, because we believe this is our last opportunity. I mean, this is the first time in 25 years that everybody's paying attention, that her story has been brought back to the world by this Netflix series. And, we've gotten thousands of leads and pictures and all kinds of things since the show came out. And we're following some. There are some that are credible enough to have to look at and rule out. And most of them I can't really share because I don't want to compromise, the investigation in any way. But we're really trying to get some renewed attention, get the case reinvestigated. We're trying to get the FBI's case actually closed so that we can finally gain access to the FBI records, which we've never been privy to. We feel that if we're able to learn what they did and what they didn't do, and couple that with everything that we've learned and found out over the years, that would bring us steps closer. Then we're hopeful that we can get Homeland Security investigations with their framework in trafficking. They have MOUs or memorandums of understanding with these islands. They have boots on the ground. They have the capacity to actually affect a new investigation and can bypass some of these jurisdictional barriers that have hampered the FBI for so many years. So that's kind of our aim and our focus. Obviously, every opportunity we get, we take it to keep the story alive, to maintain people's interest and awareness in the story, to keep people posting and sharing and resharing and talking, because we don't want, like has happened so many times in the past, for this thing to fall away from people's attention, for something crazy to happen in the world and everybody's focus shifts to the next thing. Amy deserves justice. Somebody out there knows something. I believe quite a few people know something, and this case and our ability to determine what happened to her and potentially where she may be still hinges on somebody telling what they know. So we implore somebody to come forward, to give us the information that we need. I've said on other interviews, and I'll say it again, 27 years is an awful long time to keep a secret. God is watching. He knows who you are. He knows what you did, and seek salvation before it's too late.
Where can people find you, Brad, and submit information about Amy? They have it.
Yeah, so I started my X page dedicated to this effort. That is at BradRad5 Bradley. So BRAD 5 BRADLEY. My TikTok is Amy Bradley is Missing, or you can search my name, Brad Bradley, and find it. I try to post all the information, all the interviews I do, and other pieces of evidence from the investigation on those sites. Amy's website, which is currently still active, but is in the process of undergoing a major overhaul rather. We're trying to update the site and kind of bring it into the 21st century with a lot more functionality and connectivity to other sites and things that we're doing. And that is amybradleyismissing.com. Our tip line email, amybradleyismissing@gmail.com. And the phone number is 804-789-4AMY, or that's 804-789-4269. So those are the best ways to share information, send us information. We'll protect your privacy if you come forward. And if you've signed an NDA with this ship or this company, reporting a crime 27 years later, NDAs don't hold any weight there. So you are certainly able to come forward, even if you did sign something to keep quiet. I think, the final message would be, again, somebody out there knows something. Somebody needs to say something. It's been long enough. Amy's suffered enough. We've all suffered enough. It's time to come forward with what you know. To all those out there who have supported us and sent us prayers and well wishes and all those types of things, thank you from all of us. It's more meaningful than I can explain to you, and I can't tell you how heartening it's been over the past 2.5 months to see the outpouring from around the world. So thank you to everybody out there. Please, again, please keep the story alive. We're working as hard as we can to make something happen. We're going to be working on trying to push legislation to change the laws relative to the cruise industry and a lot of the ways that they circumvent our authorities' ability to investigate. So we're not going to give up. We understand that people don't get it. They think 27 years goes by and they look at me and they're like, what are you doing, man? She's gone. And she may well be, but we've never been presented with any factual evidence that she's not alive. So we're not going to dishonor Amy and give up ever until we're presented with something that tells us we need to stop. We're going to keep looking. Amy, if you're out there and somehow, some way able to see this, we're not going to stop trying to find you. We're not going to stop trying to hold those accountable. And we're not going to stop, trying as hard as we can to bring you home. So hang in there if you can see this. Try to contact us any way you can. And we love you.
It's incredible what awareness can do, to your point about the last 2.5 months. And I just pray that this awareness keeps spreading. You always have a home here, Brad, on the Fox True Crime podcast for updates or appeals and messaging out to the public, because we are all in this together for all of these. And just know that we are here 100% supporting you and behind your family and hoping for the absolute best, and understand that that takes effort and continued alliance and dedication and support for this cause. So just know the Bradley family is not alone, not by a long shot.
Thank you. It means a lot. And anytime you'd like to have me on, I've got about 1.5 million other things to say that we could cover and tell a fuller story. But I appreciate it, Emily. Means a lot that you reached out and offered to do this. And thank you very much.